Oh man, get ready for some craziness filed smack in the middle of the Japanese weird cabinet. Monkeypaw Games brings us Kyuiin, a PS1 import horizontal shmup for download on the PSN about a storybook kingdom under siege from a wicked wizard, who's messing about with the plots of popular stories and fables. The kingdom's only hope? A young boy and his little sister valiantly riding into battle on vacuum cleaners. Huh. Well, sure, why the hell not? Space fighters and heavily armed mecha are overrated, right?
Kyuiin was originally released on the PS1 way back in 1996 by Media Entertainment, and, probably fairly obviously, never made it into the land of the rising sun. But not only does this game have an absurdly wacky choice in ship design, it also has a few nifty mechanics up its sleeve. Let's take a look.
So Kyuiin is a horizontal shmup that obviously doesn't take itself too seriously. You have access to a standard shot and a bomb attack on the outset with the option to pick up different randomized weapons via icons that appear at certain intervals. The most interesting aspect of the core gameplay, though, revolves around your vacuum's hose, which flails about in front of your character.
Certain enemies don't actually need to be shot with your weapons. Instead, if your vacuum's hose is positioned over the enemy in question, it will get sucked up into the vacuum itself. This will also charge up your bomb stock when you use one of the 3 you start with. In addition, you can suck up many of the enemy bullets and projectiles that are shot towards you as well. If you're hit though, you'll lose your hose and be reduced to a sub-basic shot until you can obtain a medic unit. Any special weapons you had prior to getting hit will be lost.
Finally, you can attack enemies that appear from behind with your vacuum's power cord. The cord's range is fairly limited, and it takes some time between uses, but it's a very powerful technique that will inflict heavy damage to whatever it hits.
Despite how absurd this all looks and sounds, Kyuiin sure doesn't pull its punches, especially later in the game. There will be times, especially starting in stage 4, when you'll be thrown right into a fairy tale Armageddon with 1.5 tons of crap flying about the screen, even on easy. Memorization helps, but your huge, tall hitbox will make things quite a bit more challenging than you think. The game engine is still pretty solid despite all of this, and it works really well. But all in all, it basically boils down to mastery of your enemy sucking techniques.
But Kyuiin feels as if it kind of overstays its welcome just a little bit, since each of the 7 stages seem to go on forever. These are some really long stages. On the whole though, Kyuiin is actually a pretty fun game, and it definitely has enough room for replay to improve for a high score. Speaking of which... The scoring in Kyuiin is more or less dependent on how you dispatch your enemies. You'll get a base score when you shoot your enemies down, but if you really want to boost your digits, sucking your enemies into your vacuum will give you the highest bonuses.
There are also times that there is a bonus counter on screen that counts down as you attempt to defeat certain enemies. The faster you defeat them, the higher the score. This has also been done on many shooters before and after Kyuiin, but it also shakes things up outside for blowing your enemies away and sucking them in.
The presentation in Kyuiin is definitely mixed. On the one hand, you're riding a vacuum through a 7-stage set with parodies of tales such as The Frog Prince, Snow White, and the Town Musicians of Bremen. The opening animation sequence is fairly well produced as well.
On the other hand though, the visuals have not exactly aged gracefully with fairly ugly pre-rendered sprites despite their cute design and chunky backgrounds. The pre-rendered opening movie after the traditional animation is also quite jarring. Despite this, some of the larger enemy sprites aren't too bad at all.
And then there's the sound. Even though the sound is clear with Red Book audio quality, the tunes here are incredibly dull and boring. If narcolepsy was contagious, this game's music would spread it on a pandemic level. Most of the sound effects are less than impressive as well.
Still, when it's all said and done, Kyuiin comes across as a pretty fun game, flaws and all. But how does it stack up? Let's take a look.
The control isn't terrible, but a large tall hitbox makes things a bit iffy when the screen gets stuffed.
For the most part, controlling my vacuum was pretty fluid, but could have been a bit sharper.
The challenge is pretty high in the later levels as well, with special thanks to that crazy hitbox.
It starts off easy enough, but the challenge really sneaks up on you.
In terms of length, these 7 stages are absurdly long. A bit too much so, in fact.
Long might just be a bit of an understatement.
The visuals are not exactly pleasing to look at, with chunky sprites and backgrounds.
The visuals might be a bit dated, but otherwise they're pretty cute.
The sound effects often get irritating and the music is a snore fest.
The soundtrack is really boring, and that laser sound, just so irritating.
Ingenuity-wise, Kyuiin does manage to stand out with its ridiculous choice in ships and novel approach to score boosting.
Kyuiin is a pretty creative game. I love the use of vacuums for ships and being able to suck up enemy fire.
When it's all said and done, Kyuiin gets a 3.5 out of 5. If you want an original copy of Kyuiin, you might be in for a shock. At auction, it goes for an absurd $70 to $90, which I would actually advise against. At that price, it's just not worth it. But thanks to Monkeypaw Games, you can download Kyuiin on the PSN for just $6, which is actually an excellent price point for this particular title.